to Book 101's all about the books that I read for the last 40 years. And today I have my special guest. He is a delivery and transformation consultant, no other than Mr. Simon Copsey. Welcome, Mr. Simon. And can you please introduce more about yourself that I miss?
Yeah, sure. No, you gave me a better introduction than I can give myself. But I'm delivery transformation consultant, Cool Consulting. I help organizations get out their own way, and I really enjoy doing that.
Yes. And thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world. And today, let's talk about how organizations get into their own way. And tell us what are the most common ways of organizations unintentionally sabotage their own success.
Yeah, sure. And I think we have to start with the just a very clear assumption here that all managers, all staff are good. They're trying their best. So it's not anything intentional. It's just organizations often feel complex, and therefore it's hard to know where to start. And what works one day may not work another day. So everyone's doing a good job. It's just sometimes organizations have a way of outsmarting us, unfortunately. But I think you probably know better than me, Daniel. Maybe let me give you a few and then see if they resonate. So we may have seen, we may see all these kind of symptoms around organizations. The ones that we all recognize, like costs increasing, things taking more and more time to deliver, staff not being happy, bureaucracy brewing, politics coming about. Um, and often all these things are symptoms that come from somewhere deeper. So I think the first way that organizations often get in their own way is when we see these things, we're so drawn to them as managers that when we see attrition, we go to where we're seeing the attrition and we try and tackle it. When we go and see projects slowing in terms of delivery, we go and try and tackle that. But what we often forget, and I forgot as a manager, is these things don't happen on their own. They're effects of something deeper. And what we need to do is not treat these effects where they happen, but like a doctor does, work out where are these symptoms coming from, track it back, and we'll find that often these things tend to come from the same place at any one time. We need to treat the source, treat the underlying cause, not the effects. Because if you go to a doctor and you just get symptom control, you might be okay for a day, but you're going to come back tomorrow and the day after and the day after, and over time you're going to feel worse. So what comes up for you, Daniel? Is that something that you've seen?
Definitely, indeed, Mister.
Oh, I'm
And
sorry.
why do you, or how do even well intentioned leaders often create systems that hinder progress?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it's part of that, right? When we get attracted to symptoms, which is what we're taught to do as kids. We're taught to look at things as individual parts. We're not taught to look at systems as a whole or organizations as a whole. We're taught to, when we have a toy, for example, to take it apart to understand each bit, and we believe that if we understand each bit, we can understand the whole thing. Um, hang in there, Daniel. Hang in there.
Hang in
Um,
there, sorry.
It's okay. It's okay. I know you've had a long day. And my wife does that all the time when I'm talking to her. So it's the same that happens in organizations. If we do that, if we try and tackle each thing in each problem in isolation, what we start to do is we build in more and more layers of bureaucracy, for example. That the problems kind of compound themselves. And so I think managers, one of the things that hurts organizations unintentionally is managers treating the symptoms rather than the cause. I guess the other thing is when there's so many symptoms, it's very easy for managers to burn out. It's very easy for managers to not be able to focus. And it's easy, therefore, for managers not to focus where they need to focus. So I think symptoms is the main thing. Being distracted by symptoms leads to managers' focus being diluted. If managers are the impact multipliers of the organization, if they're distracted, we don't get that impact multiplication. Things slow down, and we see more issues that rise as a result. I think there's more to it than that. But before I continue, I'm curious if you've seen anything similar yourself.
Well, from now I'm experiencing something that experiment. I want to experiment something that
Mm,
works for me.
yeah.
And Mr. Simon, what warning signs indicate an organizational is or organizations is working against its own goals?
That's a really good question, Daniel. I think, I mean, the first clear one, right, which is you see probably more often than not,
Yes.
is unfortunately an organization not having a clear and understood goal. And so you start to see teams working, maybe conflicting and not cooperating because they have created their own goals that they're working towards in the absence of an overarching one. Um, and if an organization is there to achieve something greater than any one individual, we need to cooperate. But if we don't have an overarching goal that we're trying to work towards, that's not clear, that's not shared, that's not understood, how can teams cooperate towards anything? And what they'll do is they'll do what they need to do, but what they need to do is not what another team needs to do, and they'll end up conflicting. So I think the first thing, your question is very astute, is there a goal? And one, because if we don't have one goal, if we're all working towards different goals, we're not cooperating and we're not able to help the organization succeed. So I think that's the very first one. Is there a goal that everyone understood, that something that everyone can measure, that everyone can work towards? Um, if not, you'll have conflicts instead of cooperation. And I guess the second one is if there's more than one goal at any one time. Um, Again, it's kind of the same thing as we talked about, right? Different
Mhm.
people gravitate towards different goals, and therefore you won't get that cooperation. A product doesn't come out at the end of the company because of one person's efforts. A product comes out at the end of a company because lots of people have worked together to get to that point, but they need to work together. So yeah, I think conflict, when we start to see conflict, when we start, or even just the absence of a goal, those kind of things kind of present the starting point of how to help.
Yes. So, Mr. Simon, let's talk about the structural and cultural issues. How do outdated hierarchies and silos prevent organizations from adapting?
Ooh, tell me more about what you mean by outdated.
Yes.
That's an interesting word. What do you mean by outdated?
Those are the rules that no longer using by these organizations.
Ooh, that's interesting.
Rules, perhaps.
Yeah, rules is a nice word. I like that. So I think if we, so how does that affect the organization? Well,
Yes.
um, I guess I mean people are going to find ways of working around the rules if they're no longer right, but it gets harder and harder to do that, right? That's when bureaucracy gets in the way, when the means, the rules get in the way, become the focus as opposed to the ends where we're trying to get to. But what's interesting about the word rules, and I like that, is that it's as we alluded to earlier, that managers that set the rules, and those rules are based on assumptions that managers have about reality. Um, they're trying to help their staff rather than hinder them, so they create rules, and those rules are trying to create predictability in how things are done, perhaps. But those rules can, as you say, become outdated. Maybe aren't quite right to begin with if the manager doesn't have uh, a holistic enough understanding. So I think rules that get in the way are going to get in the way, and they can, that can be manifest, and that tends to be the stem, the underlying cause of wherever the problems come from, directly, indirectly. And so, but if you go back one step further than just understanding the rule that's getting in the way, the real thing that behind the rule getting in the way is a manager's assumption about reality. So a common one might be, I probably say this one too much, is that a common assumption that I believed until quite recently was if we keep everyone busy all the time, we'll deliver more work in any given period. But we know from like even just being on the road, that's not true. If we have more cars on the road at any given time, all the cars slow down. Whereas if you kind of halve the number of cars on the road, they will actually go significantly faster and we get things done, right? So you actually want to cut down the traffic to let the cars get to their destination. And we know this from Kingsman's formula, a mathematical formula, if I understand correctly. So it's in theory as well as in reality, from what we could observe. We know that, we should reduce the work in process sometimes, reduce the number of projects in flight to get them done quicker.
Very well said, Mr. Simon. Very well said indeed. Beautifully articulated. What role does this is how we always done it? A thinking play in organizational stagnation.
Well, that's a good question. Well, I think it's center, right? But I
Mm,
can understand that. I think like the world is changing, and we know like um, I'm trying to think of a good way of putting this. Even if we did what we did, there's a really nice quote from Deming. He said something like um, change is not necessary, neither is survival. He put it much better than that, right?
yes.
Um, and I think one of the things that leads to that kind of comment, which is very understandable, is that often people, managers, staff, don't like to be changed. I don't like to be changed, but they they have nothing against change itself. It's just they mind being changed. They mind being the subject of change. So I think that leads to the need for them being included in change. And the important thing there isn't just the fact that you're including a staff just for the hell of it. They know what's needed to make things better. Managers, leaders can't see the whole system. Staff can't see the whole system. You need everyone to understand the whole, who can see the whole organization, for you to be able to understand the problem it's facing, really where it's coming from, and therefore a more bulletproof improvement. So I think by fair process, I think that's terms where you include people as part of the change because you need them as well as you want them to be part of it. Uh, from a kind of ethical perspective, that can help overcome that. Well, this is how it's always been done. And the great thing about this is always how it's always been done is there are people there who can become who can really scrutinize any change that you propose and make it better because they understand the reason why things have been done the way it's done. So they're actually really important allies.
Mr. Simons, as a delivery and transformation consultant, what are your short-term and long-term goals?
That's a good question. Um, well, my long-term goal is I've just had a son, and uh, so I need to help him have a happy and fulfilling life. Um, but also want staff and organizations to have happy and fulfilling lives. And I think that's probably why I really like helping organizations the most, because staff are the people who have the biggest stakeholder in organizations. They're there for the longest, they make the most decisions. If the organization fails, they're the people who suffer the most. And they're also the people who can help the organization succeed the most. Their wealth, organizations in my mind, coming from ACOB, is their wealth distribution. They're one of the only ways in capitalist economies to distribute wealth, to help people have the money they need to survive. So I want to help my family have a happy life, but also want to help staff have a happy life.
Good luck to your goals, Mr. Simon, and looking forward for more success for sure. And what would be your piece of advice for those people out there who want to be, of course, like you, a
Oh,
consultant?
uh, I'd want them to check whether that's what they really want. Um, I'm not sure. I mean, everything I could suggest has probably been suggested before, but I guess the single most powerful word that we often forget to ask, or actually have been conditioned not to ask, is why. By asking why, we get back from a solution to the problem. And any one problem has many solutions, but if you any one solution has only one solution, only one way forward, which means you're locked in, and that doesn't mean it means you can't adapt. So by asking why, we get back to a space where we can find um, a way forward and adapt as we learn more about a situation. Keep asking why. It's
Hmm.
not a rude question. It's fantastic.
Asking why
Mm.
and why for sure. And thank you for that advice, Mr. Simon. And can you please recommend a book or books that influence your journey?
Yeah, absolutely. So my mentor, Noah Cantor, he said if I wanted to work with him as a consultant, this is my first consulting role, I needed to read a book called The Goal by Ellie Goldratt. I'm sure many people have heard of it, but never enough. Ellie Goldratt introduced the theory of constraints. He was the originator for the theory of constraints, which is really just a scientific approach to solving problems in social contexts like organizations where they seem complex. Um, and um, as opposed to applying kind of like a pseudoscience approach, which is very tempting to do. Um, and so he wrote The Goal, he wrote It's Not Luck, things like that. And all those books help people understand how to apply a scientific, structured approach that allows you to reduce uncertainty as you introduce change and make sure you're getting close to where you want to be as opposed to just tampering with an organization. Um, very closely connected to him are books by Akov, who tried to make systems thinking very simple and did a very good job of it. He's introduced a lot of storytelling to how he told things. Any videos on YouTube, any books by Akov are fantastic, particularly The Art of Problem Solving. And Deming, of course, everyone has to mention Deming, who really helped through a very direct writing style, show how a lot of management assumptions that we believe to be true today that have been inherited from generation to generation of manager aren't valid and should be questioned. And it gives you an approach for questioning things. And Goldratt's book, of course, led to things like the Phoenix Project, a lot of the DevOps movement. It was part of the inspiration for that, their business novels. And I could probably carry on, but those three authors in particular have shaped a lot for me: Akov, Deming, and Goldratt. But there's so many more. Drucker, and I'm sure I'll think of more. But yeah,
Thank you for the recommended books, Mr. Simon. And how can organizations balance the need for structures with the need for flexibility?
I don't think they're opposed. Can you help give me an example?
Yes, say let's say one organization, how they balance their rules or structures so that they can adopt a new challenge like AI.
Oh, I see. But I'm not sure if they're naturally opposed. Structure and I don't think they're naturally opposed. Um, but maybe if we assume they are opposed, then one thing might be to do is when a rule is introduced, what we often forget to do is record the reason why. What is the intended effect of this rule? So that when we come back to it, we can check it's having the intended effect or realize when it's outdated. In sociocracy, for example, I think they have a review date for every rule they put in place. They have the issue a review date, and extended that and having a intended effect of a rule can help us ensure it's taking us close to where we want to be. Often that why or intended effect is forgotten, is lost when the rule is created and the person leaves the organization. We get meetings that we don't know the reason behind. We get procedures that we just can't question because there's no one there to question. So I think recording the why. I think Goldratt had a tool for this. I think it's been replaced, but it was called a transition tree. It recorded if we have this situation and we do this, we should expect this outcome. It's a very simple if then, but by recording the if then, we can then check if we're having the intended effect, and if not, we can update our procedures or eradicate them.
Definitely. And let's talk about the future focus. What emerging trends are making these organizational challenges more urgent?
So that's an interesting question. I think a lot of there's a difference between problems and solutions, I think, which is maybe relevant here, which is that solutions tend to change quite quickly, whereas problems don't. So we're seeing a lot of emergent solutions, as you know, like DevOps was a while ago, Agile, AI, blockchain. But what's more steady are problems. Problems tend to not change as rapidly. They tend to exist for a while. And you tend to see patterns of problems across different organizations. So I think by going back to what we said earlier, by asking why and going back to the problem to be solved, we'll see some things that are pretty recognizable. And then we are fortunate to have more and more solutions to pick from. Now that we have AI, now that we have machine learning, now that we have cloud, now that we have agile, now that we have DevOps, we have more and more solutions to pick from. But what is fairly constant is the problems that we see. So I feel make sure you're making sure we understand the problem means that we don't get overloaded by solutions.
Very well said, Mr. Simon. Truly, truly empowering. And before we wrap up our discussion for today, I'm inviting you to please do listen to my other podcast, people, my other podcast, because my abstract essay is already in fifth season, abstract poetry in second season, and book 101 review in fifth season too, comedy 101
Mm-hmm.
second season, and my food 101 in fifth season as well, Geography 101 in fourth season, and my baby podcast Law 101 and Mental Health 101 Love Letters in third season, and Movie 101 Review and Music 101 in fourth season, and Science 101 and Sex 101 in its first season. Please listen to them. wherever you listen your podcast. So, Mr. Simon, if you could fix just one common organizational self-sabotage pattern, which would have the biggest impact?
Probably going back to what we said at the beginning. So helping differentiate between causes and symptoms. Um, I think often we try to tackle the symptoms, but looking beyond first order and understanding where those things come from, like a doctor, like a scientist, that would be incredible and help us get to the root of issues where we have more leverage, where we have more impact, where we can create more positive things for more people with less effort. That would be my wish.
Mr. Simon Copsey, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world. So, can you please invite our listeners to support your advocacy or whatever projects that you're doing right now?
Sorry, could you repeat the question? I didn't catch the first part.
Yes, can you please invite our listeners to support our your advocacy or any projects that you're doing right now?
Oh, absolutely. Thank you. So, yeah. So, on curiouscoffee.club, you can find me. I release articles every week. I would love to be people to disagree with me. I learn through disagreement. There's conference talks there. Again, disagreements are very welcome, helps me learn. And there's a book there as well.
Yeah,
Look at
yeah,
you.
definitely. And tell us, what is the Curious Coffee Club, Mr. Simon?
Absolutely. So, the Curious Coffee Club is where you can go to learn more about how you can help organizations get out of their own way, question assumptions in organizations, get back to the problem, all the things we've talked about. A lot of the articles try to be very straightforward and very short. So even if you just have a very small espresso in front of you, that's enough to get you through an article.
Yes, people, let's support Mr. Simon Copsey because if you support him, for sure, more and more and more empowering business to come. So, Mr. Simon, thank you so much for your time.
Likewise, Daniel. Lovely to be with you.
More to come, people. See you soon.